The distress beacon had been screaming into the void of space for 18 days. It was a simple signal, repeating the same message over and over again. Most ships in the sector had ignored it. Some had heard it and turned away. Others had pretended they never received it at all. The galaxy was full of suffering, and most species had learned to look the other way. But the Hughes Resolute was not most ships. Captain Kim Hannah stood at the center of the bridge, her boots planted firmly on the metal floor. She was a woman of 42 years, with short black hair and a thin scar running down her left cheek. Her eyes were dark and tired, the eyes of someone who had seen too much and forgotten none of it. She wore the gray uniform of the United Earth Navy, and on her shoulder was the patch of a blue planet surrounded by stars. The holographic display in front of her flickered with the incoming transmission. The words appeared in pale blue light, translated from an alien language into English. Help. They are harvesting us. Please. Anyone. Help. Lieutenant Park Do-hyun stood at the communications console, his young face tight with concern. He was only 28, fresh from the academy, but he had already learned that space was not the adventure the movies had promised. It was cold. It was empty. And it was cruel. The signal is coming from Veltri 7, he said. A moon in the outer territories. It belongs to the Pelori. Hannah knew the Pelori. Everyone in the galaxy knew the Pelori. They were a gentle species, standing about 4 feet tall with soft gray skin that glowed with faint bioluminescence. They had large eyes and thin limbs and voices like wind chimes. They were artists and poets and philosophers. They believed in peace above all things. They had no army, no weapons, no violence in their entire history. The galaxy called them beautiful. The galaxy also called them weak. Who was attacking them? Hannah asked. Do-hyun swallowed hard. The Drath hegemony. The bridge went silent. Every crew member stopped what they were doing. The Drath were known throughout the galaxy as slavers and flesh traders. They were large reptilian creatures with thick scales and 4 arms. They viewed other species the way humans viewed cattle. Useful for labor. Useful for parts. Useful for food. The Galactic Council had condemned the Drath many times. They had written strongly worded letters. They had imposed sanctions. They had expressed deep concern. None of it had ever stopped the Drath from doing exactly what they wanted. How many Pelori on that moon? Hannah asked. Approximately 4,000, Do-hyun replied. Mostly civilians, families. Weapons Officer Choi Min-jae looked up from his station. He was a broad man with thick arms and a shaved head. His hands were covered in old scars from years of combat. Captain, the Drath have 3 harvester ships in orbit. Heavy armor. Full crew. If we go in there, we will be outgunned. I am aware, Hannah said. The smart move would be to report this to the Galactic Council and let them handle it. And how long would that take? Min-jae was quiet. They both knew the answer. Weeks. Maybe months. By then, the Pelori would be gone. Sold. Butchered. Scattered across 100 black markets in 100 systems. Medical Officer Yoon Soo-jin stepped forward. She was a small woman with kind eyes and steady hands. She had spent 15 years patching up soldiers and refugees and survivors of things that should never have happened. Captain, I have to ask, what exactly are you planning? Hannah turned to face her crew. There were 47 of them on this ship. 47 humans from Earth? The galaxy had a name for their homeworld. They called it a Category 9 death world. The gravity was too strong. The radiation was too high. The predators were too many. Life on Earth was a constant war for survival, and humans had won that war by becoming the most dangerous thing on the planet. Other species in the galaxy found humans unsettling. They smiled too much. They showed their teeth. They could eat almost anything. They healed from wounds that would kill other species. They kept going when their bodies should have stopped. They felt fear like everyone else, but they had learned to ignore it. The Pelori sent a distress signal, Hana said. They asked for help. They asked anyone who could hear them to please come and save them. She looked around the bridge at each face. Some were scared. Some were angry. Some were both. We heard them, she continued. We are the only ones who answered. So we are going to Veltri 7, and we are going to do what needs to be done. Chief Intelligence Officer Li Jiwan raised her hand. She was a thin woman with sharp features and glasses that she did not actually need, but wore anyway. Captain, I feel I should mention that engaging the Drath hegemony without authorization could be considered an act of war. Earth has no formal alliance with the Pelori. We have no legal obligation to intervene. I know, Hana said. The Council could condemn us. They could sanction Earth. They could call us aggressors. I know. Jiwan nodded slowly. Good. I just wanted to make sure you understood the consequences. She paused. For the record, I think we should go anyway. A murmur went through the bridge. One by one, the crew members nodded. They were scared. They knew what was waiting for them. But they were also human, and humans had a very old instinct that ran deeper than fear. When the weak cried out, the strong were supposed to answer. Set a course for Veltri 7, Hana ordered. Maximum speed. Yes, Captain. Dohin's fingers flew across the console. We will arrive in 6 hours. Hana walked to the front of the bridge and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 4,000 Pelori were waiting. They were praying to whatever gods they believed in. They were hoping that the universe was not as cruel as it seemed. They had no idea what was coming. The Pelori had asked for help. They had imagined that help would come in the form of diplomats and negotiations and peaceful resolutions. They had imagined kind faces and gentle words and careful compromises. Instead, the universe was sending them the children of a death world. 47 humans who had grown up on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. 47 humans who had been taught since birth that survival was something you took with your own 2 hands. The Pelori wanted kindness. They were about to get something else entirely. Captain, Do-hyun said quietly, what do we tell the Council if they ask why we did this? Hana did not turn around. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark glass of the viewport, superimposed over 1,000,000 distant stars. Tell them we heard someone screaming, she said. Tell them we decided to do something about it. The Resolute's engines roared to life, and the ship jumped into hyperspace, racing toward a moon where 4,000 innocent beings were running out of time. Behind them, the distress beacon continued its endless cry. Help! They are harvesting us, please. Help was coming. But it was not the kind of help the galaxy expected. The Resolute dropped out of hyperspace behind a dead moon, using its mass to hide from enemy sensors. The ship drifted in silence, its engines cold, its lights dim. Inside, the crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for what was to come. Captain Kim Hana stood in the briefing room with her senior officers gathered around a circular table. A holographic projection floated above the surface, showing Veltri 7 in pale blue light. The moon was small and gray, covered in rocky plains and shallow valleys. Before the Drath arrived, it had been home to a peaceful Pelori colony. Now it was something else entirely. Chief Intelligence Officer Li Jiwan had spent the last 3 hours gathering data. She had deployed tiny surveillance drones that flew past the moon and recorded everything they saw. Now she pressed a button, and the hologram changed to show the surface of Veltri 7 in terrible detail. 3 Drath harvester ships in orbit, Jiwan said, pointing to the massive vessels that hung above the moon like hungry predators. Each one carries approximately 200 crew members and 50 soldiers. Heavy armor. plasma cannons, shield generators, and on the surface? Hannah asked. G1 hesitated for just a moment. Then she pressed another button. The hologram zoomed in to show a large camp surrounded by metal walls and guard towers. Inside the walls, thousands of Pelori were crowded together in tight groups. They sat on the bare ground with no shelter and no protection from the cold. Many of them were not moving at all. Approximately 4,000 Pelori survivors, G1 said. They have been sorted into 3 categories. Those strong enough for labor are being held in the eastern section. Those with compatible organs are in the medical facility. And the rest, she paused. The rest are in the processing center. No one asked what the processing center was for. They all knew. Medical Officer Yoon Soo-jin leaned forward, her face pale. How many dead? Our drones detected approximately 600 bodies in mass graves to the north of the camp. Based on the rate of burial, they are killing roughly 50 Pelori per day. The room was silent. Soo-jin closed her eyes and took a slow breath. She had seen many terrible things in her career. She had treated soldiers who had been burned and broken and torn apart. But there was something different about this. Something that made her stomach turn in a way she had not felt in years. Weapons. Officer Choi Min-jae studied the hologram with cold eyes. He had fought in 3 wars before joining the Resolute. He had killed enemies and watched friends die. He thought he had seen everything the universe had to offer. He was wrong. Rules of engagement, Captain? He asked. Hana looked at the hologram. She looked at the camp and the bodies and the ships that hung overhead like vultures waiting for a meal. She thought about the Pelori elder who had probably recorded that distress signal, hoping against hope that someone out there would hear and would care. No rules, she said quietly. Not for this. Min-jae nodded. He had expected that answer. Lieutenant Park Do-hyun raised his hand. Captain, I have been monitoring draft communications. They do not know we are here. They think they are alone. They think no one is coming. Good. We will use that. Hannah turned to face her officers. They looked back at her with expressions, ranging from determination to fear to something that might have been called righteous anger. They were all professionals. They all knew what they were about to do. And they all knew that some of them might not survive. The Drath have never fought humans before, Hannah said. Their intelligence files list us as a minor spacefaring race with aggressive tendencies. They know we come from a death world, but they do not understand what that means. She pulled up a new display showing the Drath soldiers. They were large creatures, standing nearly 7 feet tall with thick scales and powerful muscles. Their 4 arms ended in sharp claws, and their mouths were filled with rows of triangular teeth. They think they are predators, Hana continued. They think they are the top of the food chain. They have spent centuries preying on weaker species because no one has ever stopped them. No one has ever made them afraid. She looked around the room. We are going to change that. Sergeant Baek Junwoo was the leader of the ground assault team. He was a solid man in his mid-30s, with short hair and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had spent 15 years in special operations, learning how to kill efficiently and without hesitation. My team is ready, he said. 20 soldiers. Full combat gear. We can be on the ground in 30 minutes. The Drath guards will outnumber you, G1 pointed out. There are at least 150 soldiers in that camp. Junwoo smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Then it will be a fair fight. The humans around the table understood what he meant. The Drath were bigger. The Drath were stronger. The Drath had better weapons and more numbers. But humans had something the Drath did not. Humans were persistent. Other species in the galaxy ran when they were hurt. They stopped when they were tired. They gave up when the odds were against them. Evolution had taught them to conserve energy, to avoid danger, to survive by being careful. Humans were different. On Earth, the weak did not survive. The planet had spent millions of years killing anything that was not strong enough or smart enough or stubborn enough to keep fighting. Humans had learned to push through pain. They had learned to ignore exhaustion. They had learned to keep going long after their bodies screamed at them to stop. The Drath had no idea what was coming. "Commander O Taeyang," Hana said, turning to a tall man standing at the edge of the group. "You will lead the assault on the primary harvester ship. Disable their communications first, then take the bridge." Taeyang nodded. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke more than necessary. His eyes were calm and steady, the eyes of someone who had made peace with death a long time ago. "And the other two ships?" he asked. "Once the first ship is down, the other two will panic. They will try to run or call for help. We will not let them do either." Sujin cleared her throat. "Captain, I have to ask something. The Pelori, they are pacifists. They have never seen violence. When they see what we are about to do, it may traumatize them. They may not understand." Hannah was quiet for a moment. She thought about the gentle Pelori with their soft skin and glowing bodies. She thought about how they must have felt when the Drath ships appeared in their sky. She thought about the screaming and the running, and the terrible moment when they realized that no one was coming to save them. "They will survive the trauma," she said finally. "That is more than they will get from the Drath." She looked at each of her officers one last time. "We have 6 hours to prepare. Make them count. When we hit that moon, we hit it hard, and we do not stop until every single Drath is dead or fled. No prisoners, no mercy, no hesitation. And if they surrender?" Do-hyun asked quietly. Hannah thought about the mass graves. She thought about the processing center. She thought about the 4,000 Pelori huddled in the cold, waiting to be butchered like animals. "They had 18 days to surrender," she said. "They chose to keep killing instead. Now they will face the consequences." The meeting was over. The officers filed out to prepare their teams. Soon the Resolute would move from behind the dead moon and begin its attack. Soon the Drath would learn a lesson that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Some distress signals should not be ignored. Some prayers are answered by monsters. And sometimes, the monsters are on your side. The assault began at 3 in the morning, local time. The Drath had chosen this hour because it was when the Pelori were weakest. The gentle aliens needed light to function properly, and in the darkness of the long night, they became slow and confused. The Drath guards were relaxed, confident that no one was coming to rescue their prey. They were wrong. Sergeant Baek Jungwoo dropped from the transport ship with his team, falling through the thin atmosphere like stones from the sky. The humans wore heavy combat suits designed for high-gravity worlds, packed with armor and weapons and oxygen supplies. To the Drath, the suits looked bulky and awkward. They did not understand that humans actually moved better under heavy weight. Their bodies were built for burdens. Their muscles grew stronger with resistance. 20 soldiers hit the ground in perfect formation, their boots slamming into the rocky soil without a sound. The impact dampeners in their suits absorbed the shock. They stood in the darkness, 20 shadows that did not belong, and began to move toward the camp. The first Drath patrol never saw them coming. Private Shin Yuna was the smallest member of the assault team. She was 23 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighed barely 50 kilograms. Back on Earth, people often underestimated her. They looked at her soft face and slim build and assumed she was fragile. Those people were fools. Yuna had grown up in the slums of a crowded city where violence was common and mercy was rare. She had learned to fight before she learned to read. She had joined the military at 18, seeking a way out, and had discovered that she had a talent for killing things quickly and efficiently. Now, She crept through the darkness toward a Drath guard standing at the edge of the camp. The creature was nearly twice her height, with scales as thick as body armor and claws that could tear through metal. It carried a plasma rifle and wore a smug expression, confident in its own superiority. Yuna moved in silence. Humans had evolved on a planet full of predators, and they had learned to be very, very quiet when they needed to be. Her footsteps made no sound. Her breathing was slow and controlled. She was a ghost in combat armor, death wrapped in gray metal. The Drath guard never knew she was there until her knife slid between the scales at the base of its skull. The creature dropped without a sound. Yuna caught its body and lowered it gently to the ground, already moving toward the next target. In the darkness around her, the rest of the team was doing the same thing. 20 humans. 50 Drath guards on the outer perimeter thought it took less than 10 minutes. Jianwu's voice came through the communication system, calm and professional. Outer perimeter clear. Moving to the main camp. All teams report. The responses came one by one. No casualties. No alarms. The Drath still had no idea they were under attack. Inside the camp, the Pelori prisoners huddled together for warmth. They had stopped crying days ago. Tears required energy, and they had none left to spare. They simply waited hollow-eyed and hopeless for whatever horror would come next. An old female Pelori, named something that roughly translated to soft wind, sat at the edge of one group. Her bioluminescence so dim it was almost invisible. She had been a teacher before the Drath came. She had taught young Pelori about art and music and the beauty of peaceful existence. Now she taught them nothing, because there was nothing left to teach. She heard the first scream. It came from the guard tower to the south, a high-pitched shriek of surprise and pain that was cut off abruptly. Soft wind lifted her head, confused. The Drath never screamed. The Drath were the ones who caused screaming, not the ones who experienced it. More sounds followed. Gunfire, sharp and loud and unfamiliar. Shouting in a language she did not recognize. The thump of bodies hitting the ground. The crash of doors being kicked open. And then she saw them. They came out of the darkness like something from a nightmare. Bipedal creatures in heavy armor, carrying weapons that spat fire and metal. They moved fast, faster than anything Soft Wind had ever seen, flowing through the camp like water through a broken dam. Wherever they went, Drath soldiers fell. One of the armored figures stopped in front of the prisoner cage. It was small, smaller than a Drath, smaller even than some of the Pelori. Through the faceplate of its helmet, Soft Wind could see two eyes that reflected the firelight. Human eyes. Predator eyes. The figure raised one hand and pressed something on the side of its helmet. The faceplate slid open, revealing a young female face. Dark hair, dark eyes, a mouth that was not smiling. "Stay down," the human said in accented Pelori. "We are here to help." Then she turned and ran toward the sound of more fighting, leaving Soft Wind to stare after her in stunned silence. Across the camp, Junwoo led the assault on the main complex. The Drath had realized they were under attack now, and they were fighting back. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, burning hot and bright. A normal species would have taken cover. A normal species would have called for retreat. Junwoo charged forward. The humans used kinetic weapons, rifles that fired metal projectiles at incredible speeds. The galaxy considered such weapons primitive. Energy weapons were cleaner, more efficient, more civilized. But humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of throwing things very hard, and they had become very good at it. A Drath soldier stepped out of a doorway, plasma rifle raised. Junwoo shot him 3 times in the chest before the creature could pull the trigger. The bullets punched through the thick scales like they were paper. The Drath collapsed, surprise frozen on its face. Humans were not stronger than Drath. They were not faster. They were not tougher. But they had one advantage that made up for all of that. They did not stop. A plasma bolt grazed Jung-woo's shoulder, burning through his armor and scorching the flesh beneath. The pain was incredible, like being touched by a star. A Drath would have fallen. A Pelori would have died from shock. Jung-woo gritted his teeth and kept moving. Another human, Corporal Kang Minho, took a direct hit to the leg. The blast burned through muscle and bone, crippling him instantly. He fell to the ground, dragging himself behind cover with his arms. Then he propped himself against the wall, raised his rifle, and continued shooting. The Drath had never seen anything like it. These creatures should have been dead. They should have been screaming in agony, begging for mercy, running away in terror. Instead, they kept coming. They kept fighting. They kept killing in the prisoner cages. The Pelori watched in silent horror. They had prayed for rescue. They had imagined diplomatic ships and peace negotiations and the gentle resolution of conflict. Instead, they were watching their captors being slaughtered by creatures that seemed to feel no pain and know no fear. Soft. Wynn saw a human soldier get hit by a Drath blade, the sharp claw raking across his chest and drawing blood. The human stumbled back, looked down at the wound, and then looked up at the Drath with an expression that made Soft Wynn's blood run cold. The human smiled. Then he grabbed the Drath by its throat and killed it with his bare hands. By dawn, the camp was secure. 150 Drath soldiers were dead. The humans had suffered 12 wounded and 2 killed. The Pelori prisoners were free, sitting in the open air for the first time in weeks. Staring at their rescuers with a mixture of gratitude and terror, Jung-woo stood at the center of the camp. His armor scorched and dented, his shoulder still bleeding beneath a hasty bandage. He looked at the Pelori, these gentle creatures who had never known violence, and he felt something that might have been pity. They had called for help, and help had come. But it had not come with kindness. It had not come with soft words and gentle hands. It had come with fire and blood and the ancient rage of a species that had learned to survive by being the most dangerous thing in the room. The Pelori had wanted saviors. They had gotten humans instead, and now they would have to live with what that meant. While Sergeant Jung-woo's team was liberating the camp on the surface, Commander Oh Tae-young was leading his own assault in the darkness of space. His target was the primary Drath harvester ship, a massive vessel that hung in orbit above Veltris 7, like a bloated spider waiting for prey. Tae-young's team consisted of 15 soldiers, each one trained in zero-gravity combat and shipboarding operations. They approached the harvester in a small shuttle, running silent with no lights and no active systems. To the Drath sensors, they were invisible. Just another piece of space debris drifting past. The shuttle attached to the harvester's hull with magnetic clamps, and Tae-young's team cut their way through the outer plating. The Drath had designed their ships to withstand plasma fire and energy weapons. They had never considered the possibility that someone might simply cut a hole in the side with a fusion torch. Humans poured into the ship like water through a cracked dam. The interior of the harvester was warm and humid, designed for the comfort of cold-blooded Drath. The gravity was light, maybe half of Earth standard, which made the humans feel like they were flying. The corridors were wide and curved, built for creatures much larger than the human soldiers who now stalked through them. Lieutenant Han Soin led the communications team. Her job was simple: destroy the ship's ability to call for help. She moved through the lower decks with 3 soldiers, avoiding contact when possible and eliminating threats when necessary. A Drath technician rounded a corner and found himself face to face with 4 armored humans. He opened his mouth to scream a warning, but Soin was faster. Her knife found his throat before any sound could escape. "Communications center is ahead," she whispered into her radio. 2 guards on the door. "Take them out," Tae-young replied. quietly. The guards died without raising an alarm. Soyin's team entered the communications center and began their work. Within minutes, every transmitter on the ship was dead. The harvester was now completely cut off from the rest of the Drath hegemony. No one was coming to help them. Meanwhile, Taehyung's main force was pushing toward the bridge. The Drath crew had finally realized something was wrong, and they were scrambling to mount a defense. Soldiers poured into the corridors, plasma rifles blazing, filling the air with deadly light. The humans did not slow down. Private Yoon Himwoo took a plasma bolt to the chest. His armor absorbed most of the impact, but the force of it knocked him off his feet. He hit the wall hard, the wind driven from his lungs. A Drath soldier loomed over him, raising its weapon for a finishing shot. Himwoo grabbed the alien's leg and pulled. The Drath stumbled, surprised by the strength of this small creature. Before it could recover, Hyungwoo was on top of it, his combat knife punching through the soft tissue under its jaw. He stood up, ignoring the pain in his chest, and kept moving. The Drath captain was a creature named Vress. He was old by the standards of his species, having spent 40 years in the harvesting trade. He had processed thousands of slaves from dozens of worlds. He had grown rich on the suffering of others, and he had never once felt a moment of guilt. Now he stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the security feeds with growing disbelief. What are these creatures? He demanded. Where did they come from? His second-in-command, a younger Drath named Krell, was frantically working the tactical console. The records identify them as humans, a species from a death world called Earth. They are classified as a minor threat. A minor threat? Vress watched as 3 of his soldiers were cut down by a single human who refused to die despite being shot twice. Does that look minor to you? The bridge doors exploded inward. Taehyung came through first, his rifle raised and firing. 2 Drath guards fell before they could react. Behind him came his team, spreading out across the bridge with professional efficiency. Within seconds, every Drath officer was either dead or on their knees with their hands raised. Vress was the last one standing. He backed away from the humans, his 4 hands raised in surrender. His mind was racing, trying to find a way out of this situation. He had credits. He had information. He had connections throughout the galaxy. Surely there was something these creatures wanted. I surrender, he said quickly. I am a valuable prisoner. I know the locations of other harvesting operations. I can give you names, coordinates, anything you want. Taehyung walked toward him slowly. His armor was scorched and dented. There was blood on his hands, some of it his own. His face was calm, almost peaceful, like a man who had found exactly what he was looking for. The Pelori on that moon, Taehyung said. How many did you kill? Vress hesitated. I do not have exact numbers. Perhaps 500 or 600. But they were just Pelori. They are not a protected species. What we did was perfectly legal under hegemony law. Legal, Taehyung repeated. The word hung in the air like poison. Yes, legal and profitable. The Pelori have excellent organs for transplantation. Their nervous systems are particularly valuable. We were simply conducting business. Taehyung nodded slowly. He turned to one of his soldiers. Show him the footage from the surface. The soldier pulled up a holographic display. It showed the mass graves. It showed the processing center where Pelori were cut apart while still alive. It showed the cages where children huddled in terror, waiting for their turn on the table. Vress watched without expression. Yes, that is standard procedure. What is your point? My point, Taehyung said, is that you had 18 days to stop this. 18 days after the distress signal went out. You could have released the prisoners. You could have fled. Instead, you kept killing. Every single day. Why would we stop? No one was coming to save them. No one ever comes. Taeyang smiled. It was a cold smile, the smile of something that had stopped being human hours ago. We came. Vress felt the first stirring of real fear. I am surrendering. I am offering you information. Under galactic law, you cannot harm a prisoner who has surrendered. We are not from the galaxy, Taeyang said. We are from Earth, and on Earth, we have a very old tradition. When someone hurts the innocent, when someone preys on the weak, when someone does what you have done to those Pelori down there, he stepped closer. We do not take prisoners. Vress opened his mouth to argue, to plead, to offer something, anything that might save his life. But Taeyang was already moving. The draft captain died badly. His screams echoed through the bridge until they were cut short. The other draft prisoners watched in horror as their leader was torn apart by a creature half his size. When it was over, Taeyang turned to his team. His hands were covered in blood. His eyes were empty. The other two ships are trying to run, Lieutenant Soyan reported. They have seen what we did here. Can we catch them? One of them. The other will escape. Taeyang nodded. Good. Let it escape. Let it tell the others what happened here. He looked down at the body of Captain Vress. Let them all know that humans have come to this part of the galaxy. And let them know what happens when you hurt the people we decide to protect. The surviving draft ship fled into hyperspace, carrying with it the story of what had happened at Veltri 7. The crew would spread that story to every corner of the hegemony. They would describe the armored creatures who felt no pain and showed no mercy. They would describe the way Captain Vress begged for his life and received nothing but death. The galaxy would hear about the humans, and the galaxy would learn to be afraid. 3 days had passed since the battle at Veltri 7. The Drath harvester ships were burning wreckage now, their remains scattered across the orbit of the small moon. On the surface, the processing camps had been demolished, the cages torn down, the bodies of the dead given proper burial according to Pelori tradition. Captain Kim Hana stood at the edge of one of the mass graves. The Pelori had spent 2 days digging up their people and laying them to rest properly. They had sung songs that sounded like wind chimes in a storm, mourning those who had been lost. Hana had stood apart and watched, giving them their space to grieve. Now an old Pelori approached her. It was the one called Soft Wind, the former teacher who had witnessed the assault on the camp. Her bioluminescence had returned somewhat, a soft glow that pulsed beneath her gray skin. But her eyes were different now. They had seen things that could not be unseen. You saved us, Soft Wind said. Her voice was quiet and careful, as if she was afraid of breaking something. Yes, Hana replied. You killed them all, even the ones who tried to surrender. Yes. Soft Wind was silent for a long moment. She looked at the graves, then at the sky where the wreckage of the Drath ships was still visible as streaks of light. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Is that how your species solves problems? With death? Hannah thought about the question. It deserved an honest answer. Sometimes. When there is no other way. When the ones causing the problem will not stop until they are made to stop. The Pelori have never killed anyone. In all our history, we have never taken a life. We believed that all conflicts could be resolved through understanding and compromise. That is a beautiful belief. It did not save us. Hannah nodded slowly. No, it did not. Soft Wind looked at the human captain with those large, sad eyes. I watched your soldiers fight. I watched them take wounds that should have killed them and keep moving. I watched them tear apart Drath soldiers with their bare hands. I have never seen anything like it. I have never imagined anything like it. We are what our world made us, Hana said. Earth is a dangerous place. Everything that wants to kill you. The animals, the weather, the diseases, even the plants. We survive by being more dangerous than everything else. Is it terrible, living like that? Hana was quiet for a moment. She thought about her home. She thought about the mountains and the oceans and the forests full of predators. She thought about her mother who had died in a flood and her father who had died in a war. She thought about all the violence and all the beauty, tangled together so tightly they could never be separated. Sometimes, she said finally, but it is also wonderful. Because when you survive something terrible, you learn to appreciate the good things. A sunset, a meal with friends, a child's laughter. We know how fragile life is, so we hold on to every moment of it. Soft Wind considered this. And you came here to save us, even though we are nothing like you. Even though we cannot offer you anything in return. You sent a signal. You asked for help. That was enough. But why? Why would you risk your lives for strangers? Hana smiled for the first time in days. It was a small smile, tired but genuine. Because that is also what our world made us. We know what it is like to be hunted. We know what it is like to be afraid. And we decided, a long time ago, that when we finally reached the stars, we would not become the predators. We would be the ones who answer when someone cries out in the darkness. The Resolute had spent the past 2 days coordinating the evacuation of the Pelori survivors. Ships were coming from nearby systems to take them to safety. Medical teams were treating the wounded. Counselors were trying to help those whose minds had been broken by what they had witnessed. But before the humans left, there was one more thing to do. Lieutenant Park Do-yim had been working with the communications team to prepare a message. It would be broadcast across all channels, sent to every corner of the galaxy. Every species, every government, every faction would hear it. Captain Hana stood in the ruins of what had been the Drath Processing Center. Behind her, the fires were still burning. Around her, her surviving crew stood at attention, their armor scorched and dented, but their backs straight and their eyes forward. Do-hyun held up a recording device. "Ready when you are, Captain." Hana faced the camera. She did not smile. She did not soften her expression. She spoke in a voice that was calm and clear and absolutely certain. This message is for the Drath hegemony, and for anyone else in this galaxy who preys on the defenseless. She paused, letting the words sink in. My name is Kim Hana. I am the captain of the United Earthship Resolute. 3 days ago, we received a distress signal from the Pelori colony on Veltri 7. We answered that signal. We found 4,000 innocent beings being harvested like animals by Drath slavers. She gestured to the destruction behind her. The Drath had 3 harvester ships. They are now wreckage. The Drath had 200 soldiers on the ground. They are now dead. The Drath had a captain who thought he was beyond justice. He learned otherwise. Her voice hardened. Humanity has been watching from the edges of the galaxy for a long time. We have seen how you treat the weak. We have seen how you prey on those who cannot defend themselves. We have seen the cruelty and the greed and the casual evil that flows through your empires like poison. She stepped forward, her eyes boring into the camera. That ends now. The Pelori are under Earth's protection. From this day forward, any attack on their people will be considered an attack on humanity. And we do not respond to attacks with negotiations. We do not respond with sanctions. We do not respond with strongly worded letters. She let the silence stretch. We respond with fire. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Humanity has long memories. We do not forgive. We do not forget. And we do not stop. Ever. Ask the Drath how that worked out for them. To the slavers and the harvesters and the predators of this galaxy, you have been warned. We are here now. We are watching. And if we hear another distress signal, if we see another species being butchered for profit, if we find another world crying out for help that no one else will give, She smiled. It was not a kind smile. "We will come. And we will do what needs to be done." The recording ended. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council held an emergency session to discuss the Earth incident. Some members demanded that humanity be condemned for their actions. Others argued that the humans had acted within their rights to answer a distress call. The debate raged for days without resolution. Meanwhile, the effects of Hana's message rippled across the galaxy. The Drath hegemony withdrew from 17 systems, abandoning harvesting operations that had been running for decades. 4 major slaver coalitions dissolved overnight, their members too frightened to continue. A dozen predator species suddenly discovered a newfound interest in diplomatic relations with Earth. And across the galaxy, on 100 worlds where the weak had been suffering in silence, something changed. They looked up at the stars and wondered if maybe, just maybe, help might actually come if they asked for it. In her small ship traveling toward a new safe haven, Softwind thought about the humans and what they had done. She thought about Captain Hana standing in the ruins, speaking words that carried the weight of absolute certainty. She thought about the soldiers who had bled and died for strangers they had never met. The humans were not kind. They were not gentle. They were not what the Pelori had imagined when they dreamed of rescue. But they had answered. And in a galaxy full of darkness, that was enough. Far away, on a small blue planet called Earth, people went about their daily lives. They did not know about the Pelori or the Drath or the message that had been sent in their name. They worked and loved and laughed and cried, completely unaware that their species had just announced itself to the galaxy as something new. Not conquerors, not diplomats, not traders or explorers or colonizers. Something simpler, something older, something that the galaxy had not seen in a very long time. Protectors. The Deathworlders of Earth had finally arrived. And they had made their intentions perfectly clear. They would answer the call. Every time. No matter what.